Hello out there, YouTube. Welcome back to my channel, Pollock's World of Entertainment. This video is going to be on fantasy football. And yes, I have plans to be in 2 leagues this year. And, well, as far as drafting goes, we do have a few possible holdouts. Michael Thomas from the Saints, Ezekiel Elliott from the Cowboys, and Melvin Gordon from the Chargers are actually 3 of the most notable players that could be missing time this season, or if not, but possibly sitting out the entire season, like we had this past season with Le'Veon Bell. And those 3 players are definitely players that at this point, I would shy away from in the first round. And especially if obviously it's not draft day yet, but if they're still holding out and it's draft day, you may be in the second or maybe the third round if they're still there. Certainly may take a shot at them if you already have somebody really solid in front of them, or there alongside them, or if you have a really good and solid first pick. But your first pick, even your first couple picks, should be about as solid of players and as reliable of players as what you can get. Know that Todd Gurley, who was really everybody's number 1 pick from last year, has slid down the depth chart in fantasy leagues, and that he is another one you're not quite sure what you're going to be getting out of him, and you don't know how healthy he's going to be and how healthy he will stay as the season progresses. That's a big question mark. And so that's another player that is typically right among the top picks that you may want to shy away from possibly taking in the second round. But a big important point is your number 1 pick. If your number 1 pick turns out to be a bust, if your number 1 pick does not have a good season, or if they get hurt, your entire team could be in trouble. It is very difficult to recover from having a number 1 pick that turns out to be a bust, because anybody after that is going to be typically a second round pick, and that's typically what they end up producing. Obviously, you can have some players overachieve, but at any time you have a number 1 pick that turns out to be a dud. I remember in our league last year that I'm in, there was a player who drafted Le'Veon Bell as the number 1 overall pick, and that player, their team ended up finishing near the bottom of our league, and that's very difficult to recover from. It's very important that your first pick, puts up the numbers, and I can't emphasize that enough. And I've heard it many times that you're not going to win your fantasy league on your first draft pick, but you can lose your fantasy league on your first draft pick if you have a real bad number 1 and or number 2 pick. You can really put yourself in a bad position in a fantasy league. Now, also, it's going to be important when you're drafting to watch, of course, what's being drafted. You have several tight ends that are rated extremely high, but then there's a bit of a drop off after those, and the thing is, one who people always seem to expect to drop off is Eric Ebron. And I had Eric Ebron last year on my fantasy team, and he did have a couple really bad games where he put up no points, but he also had some massive games where he almost carried my fantasy team. Definitely, I still consider him to be a good pick, and as far as I'm concerned with him, he is a good pick until proven otherwise, because anytime, even when they had all their players healthy, when they had Jack Doyle healthy, he was putting up fantasy points. And the thing is, you can assume that Jack Doyle was going to take away from Eric Ebron's production, but really, he actually could help Eric Ebron's production, because he could take attention away from Eric Ebron, so Eric Ebron can get more open looks, as opposed to if it's just Ebron and no Jack Doyle, you can have Ebron getting double covered. You can have him much more tightly covered, where he doesn't have as much of a chance to get open looks at passes. But that's that. I'd still draft Ebron. I still consider Ebron to be a good pick for fantasy. Of course, I'd rather have Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, but I would actually put him right behind those three at this point. I know and most draft boards that I have seen have him further down, and no, all that I have seen all that I would see from him is production, and he may have a game or two here and there when he has a bad game and doesn't put up much. But all in all, over the course of a season, he'll put up big numbers. At least that's all that I have seen so far. You may get more reliable numbers out of one of the top three, but he's still a good pick if you're not able to get one of the top three tight ends. And keep an eye on the tight ends, because and also Vance McDonald from the Steelers would be a good pick, because without Antonio Brown on the Steelers, those passes are going to need to go somewhere, and obviously some will go to Juju Smith-Schuster, but odds are Ben will be spreading the ball around, so you can expect that Vance McDonald's production will also pick up a bit. So he's also a pretty good tight end to have on your roster, especially if you have good running backs and wide receivers. He's a good tight end to have along with them. And quarterback looks to be extremely deep. You have all of the numbers from last year, all the quarterbacks with very good numbers last year, and then you also throw in Aaron Rodgers into the mix. Aaron Rodgers had a by his standards, horrible season last year, and I wouldn't bet on a repeat. So he is probably going to be a good player to pick up as well. I would not pick him up early. I would not reach for him. There are a lot of good quarterbacks out there. I would not really reach for any quarterback. Of course, I mean, obviously, when you're getting Kansas City's, that even there, it's don't stretch. Don't try to reach for a quarterback. As long as there are good, solid running backs and wide receivers out there, try to get those first, along with tight ends, especially one of the big 3 or 4. And then, of course, kickers and defenses. Those you should never be drafting those until you get into the 9th, 10th, 11th. 10th, really into the 10th round or later. And every year is different. So even defenses that are typically very strong are not necessarily going to be strong this year. So that's, they're not typically also not a position, either kicker nor defense, that you'd want to reach for. Case in point with the Steelers last year. Their kicker had a very bad season, and going into the season, he was one of the highest rated kickers. And he had a horrible season. Now, this season could be a comeback season for him. You never know. Although for a kicker, I don't think I would draft him, just out of the possibility that he's still shaky this year. There are a lot of other kickers out there. Of course, it all depends on how large your league is, how many teams, and if you really have an interest in taking 2 kickers. Although I wouldn't really recommend that either, nor a defense. You could always pick up a defense at the on the waiver wire, and really the same with the kicker. But yep, that'll do it. As far as my take on the fantasy football and how to draft, and just really pay attention to how the league is drafting as well. If you see players being taken, like if you see a lot of running backs being taken, you need to note, and you need to look at the value of what's available as opposed to other positions. Say it's running back, and you have 4 running backs go in a row, and you need to look at wide receivers and where you are at the position. And if you have, as long as you don't have a lot of wide receivers, and it's a much stronger wide receiver available than a running back, always stick to the best available, if and at all possible. Unless, of course, you have too many running backs or too many wide receivers, and you really have to take the other, because you may only be sitting with 1 or 2 of them, and you need to get another. But yep, that'll do it for this video. Please hit the like and the subscribe button, and that'll do it. And everybody have a wonderful day. And thanks for tuning in to Pollock's World of Entertainment.